Hey everybody, it's Miss Megan. This week we're talking about the ocean. So I thought it would be a fun idea to do a sink or float experiment, okay? So I have a piece of paper and I wrote one side says sink and one side says float so we can organize our information. I took this is like a clear shoebox. I normally put my learning centers in these. I emptied one out real quick and I filled it with water with a couple drops of food coloring just to help us be able to see. When the water's clear, it's hard sometimes for the camera to pick up what's going on. So what you can do is you can go around your house and find all sorts of different things. Always ask your mom first. Things that have batteries, don't put them in the water. It messes them up. Some things you need to ask first to make sure it's okay if it goes in the water. So I've got a couple different items over here, and we're going to see which ones sink in the water and go all the way to the bottom, and which ones float on the top. So the first one I have is a pencil, just a regular pencil. What do you think will happen? Do you think it'll float on top of the water, or do you think it'll sink? Let's see. Can you see? It's floating. It's floating right on top of the water. So I'm going to put this one, you could scoot that back a little bit. So on our little chart, this one, the pencil, it was floating. All right, let's do another one. What do you think about a seashell? Do you think the seashell will float on the top, or do you think it's going to sink to the bottom? Did you hear it? Listen. Do you see it? It went straight to the bottom. I bet that's because the animals that normally live in the seashell, they need to be on the bottom to be able to crawl around. So my shell, it sank. So I'm going to stick it over here next to the word sink. What should I do next? What about a paper clip? Do you think a paper clip will float or sink? It's made out of metal, but it's kind of wide and flat. Let's see what happens. Oh, it sank all the way to the bottom. You see it down there? It's all the way at the bottom. So that one sank. What about this is a clothespin. So it's made of wood. It's got some metal in there. Do you think it's going to sink or do you think it's going to float? Let's see. Look, it's floating. So that one, it floated. The pencil's made of wood and the clothespin's made of wood. What about this? I've got these little plastic links. Do you think it will float or do you think it'll sink? Let's see. Ooh, it's floating around in there. Do you see it? So that one floats. What about this little toy? Do you think my little tiger cub, do you think it will float or do you think it'll sink? Let's find out. It's floating too. Oh, I got a little bit extra water in that one. What about my glue stick? Do you think my glue stick will float or sink? It floats too. Like a little boat. What about markers? Do you think a marker will float or sink? It floats too. What about my Legos? They also float. So far, floating's winning. All right, I've got a little pebble. Do you think this little shiny rock will float or sink? You ready? Oh, it sank. What about my pen? Let's see. It floats too. What about a little bead? Let's see what happens. Oh, it sank all the way to the bottom. I thought maybe that little bead would float, but it didn't. It went straight to the bottom. I've got a little plastic little disc. Let's see what happens. It sank. It sank in there. I thought that would have floated too. All right, look. I've got a big rock and I have a little rock. Do you think they'll both do the same thing? Here's the big rock. Sank. What about the little rock? They still both sank even though they were different sizes. What about, what about this water bottle? Do you think it'll sink or do you think it'll float? It's from our wave bottle from earlier. Let's see. Too heavy. It sank. So, did any of these items surprise you? Let's move our water out of the way. Not make too many waves. Did any of our items surprise you of what sank and what was floating? Do this at your house and see what you can find that will sink and what will float. A lot of the items that were floating were either made of wood or a really light plastic, and this one has some air holes in it, and it can just kind of float on top. The markers were floating. A lot of these other things, they're really dense, or the items are really close together. There's a hole in the shell, and it could fill with water to help it sink. And these hard plastic items and this metal item are so heavy, the water cannot support them, and that's why. What do you think a feather would do, or a ribbon? What do you think a piece of paper would do? Ask first, make sure it's not a book or anything that'll get messed up. But see if you can do this at home. What different items can you find that will sink, and what items can you find that'll float? Enjoy!